Resume is 8.5 minutes.
Lascan Corla. We're last discussing this bill. I think I was posing a series of questions on the preparation and implementation of the UN Convention to Minister McGrath. And I'd like to just add a couple of other issues to that. I'd just like to ask him, if he can outline whether, in his response, whether there have been any formal structured consultation process with civil society and specifically with people with disabilities since the publication of the roadmap to ratification of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability in October 2015 to inform the bill. Now, I know that we were supplied with, I think, through with documents such as that from the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission on their observations on the general scheme of the bill and the fact there are supplementary observations, but that's an area that I'd like to ask the Minister. He might remember, in fact, that early in this Dáil, we had a meeting of campaigners for disability rights in DBN in Dublin Bay North, organised, among others, by the great Martin Naughton, who sadly passed away subsequently. And obviously the queries, I don't think you were present yourself that night, Minister, but the issues that arose obviously were issues around that, around levels of consultation. And given that the UN Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights recommends placing, and I quote, the focal point on the Convention close to the heart of government, end quote, such as in the Office of the President or the Prime Minister or the Cabinet Office, sorry, that's the end of the quote, is the location, Minister, of the focal point within the Equality Division of the Department of Justice, is it too narrow? And would have been not better placed within the Department of Taoiseach to ensure cross-departmental collaboration and leadership at cabinet level, given that that case is made, Lascan, in relation to Brexit as well. Article 33.3 of the Convention, Minister, sets out the requirement to involve people with a disability in the monitoring process. And civil society in particular, persons with disabilities and the representative of the organisation shall be involved and participate fully in the monitoring process. I'm quoting there, I think, from the bill. Can you outline then how people with lived experience will be resourced and facilitated to play a crucial role in monitoring the implementation of the Convention in Ireland? Can you also outline how the bill will make legislative provisions to ensure that people with lived experience are the key constituents in monitoring the UN Convention in Ireland? Can the Minister also outline what advice his department has sought from the Attorney-General in relation to reasonable accommodation and the ratification of the UNCRPD? And will that legal advice be published, Minister, in the further discussions, and the fact that it's an unusual bill in that you said you bring forward very significant matters in the additional amendments? And can the Minister outline if the bill represents a full ratification of the UNCRPD, and if not, what reservations are being proposed and why? And I heard you speaking on that several times, I think, Minister, in the last and indeed possibly earlier Dáil. So can you now put people's concerns to rest in that regard and tell us if there's other work that needs to be done? Article 14b of the UNCRPD, of course, clearly states that persons with disabilities should not be, and I quote, deprived of their liberty unlawfully or arbitrarily, and that any deprivation of liberty is in conformity with the law, and that the existence of a disability shall in no case justify a deprivation of liberty, end quote. But the absence of specific legislation on deprivation of liberty as part of the bill is worrying, Minister. Given the seriousness of this equality and human rights issue, have you engaged in any formal structured discussion with civil society organisations, particularly those who are well versed in legal matters in relation to the deprivation of liberty, and when will legislation be developed in conjunction with persons with disability on this issue? And finally, could you tell us what is your timetable for implementation? It is a hugely important bill, Lascan, and follows on, of course, from the Assisted Decision-Making Capacity Bill of 2015. I've asked many parliamentary questions over the past number of years on when ratification would take place. And as the Minister well knows, there are approximately 600,000 of our fellow citizens with disabilities in Ireland, which equates to around 1 in 8 people. On the 16th of January this year, representatives from a number of disability charities launched the #RatifyCRPD campaign and included people from the Rehab Group, the Irish Wheelchair Association, the Alzheimer's Society of Ireland, Down Syndrome Ireland and the National Council for the Blind. I, of course, have also made many representations for civil society organisations over the years asking when our ratification would finally take place. And the Department of Justice did set out a roadmap to ratification which outlines the principles of the CRPD to be legislated for, which of course includes Article 3, the general principles, important Article 5, equality and non-discrimination, Article 12, equal recognition before the law, Article 13, access to justice, Article 14, liberty and security of the person, and Article 15, freedom from torture or cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment, and Article 23, respect for the home and family, and Article 27, work and employment, Article 29, participation in political and public life, and Article 33, national implementation and monitoring, just quoting some of the key headings. So I warmly welcome the fact that Ireland is also signing up to and ratifying the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which allows for complaints to be submitted to this CRPD. The total budget for disability services is 1.654 billion this year, which sees an increase of 92 million on the 2016 allocation. I recently received your reply, Minister, to a question I asked you regarding, I think, additional resources that would be deployed to disability services with the increase. And I received a reply in late January in which it was stated that the funding of 62 million was allocated on an ongoing basis to support the full year cost of approved compliance work in voluntary and statutory service providers in respect of the national standards for residential services for children and adults with disability and emergency places, which had commenced in 2015. But worryingly, however, your reply went on to say that, and I quote, "In this context, the key focus across the disability sector is on improving compliance with national residential standards as regulated by HICWA, there has been an overall steady increase, you say, in compliance with the most recent analysis of HICWA compliance for disability residential services, indicating a national compliance rate of 66%. That's welcome, but it still shows, I think, a huge gap which you need to address. And I think part of that gap, Minister, and we saw recent coverage by Primetime, Investigates and other news organisations of facilities for our fellow citizens with disability in long-term residential care. Part of the reason for the deterioration in standards of the capital provision of the buildings themselves, and indeed for cuts in staff, has to be laid at your door, and at the door of your government, and at the door of the preceding government and the last Fianna Fáil government from 2009. There's no question we've seen massive cuts. We've seen very hard-pressed staff trying to do their best and looking after more and more clients. And you know that yourself from your own visits to these institutions. Disability campaigners, of course, Lascan, they have been calling for this ratification, I think, since we signed the convention in March 2007, almost a decade ago. And the delay, of course, was attributed at times to Ireland being a dual estate. We're the only EU member state, however, not to have ratified the convention. And the basic purpose, I think, in Article 1, to promote, protect and ensure the full and equal treatment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms by all persons with disabilities, and to promote respect for their inherent dignity. It should be a fundamental value, Lascan Corla, of any modern, democratic, egalitarian nation. And for that reason, of course, it is welcome that at long last we've reached this stage, and I'll be very interested to hear the Minister's response to the debate. Thanks, Lascan.